Tonight, we journey into the heart of one of the most powerful institutions the world has ever known. An empire not cloaked in steel or gold, but in scripture, incense, and silence. Beneath the Vatican City lies a labyrinth of secrets, sealed chambers, ancient scrolls, and forbidden relics. And maybe, just maybe, an artifact so powerful, so divine, it could reshape everything we know about religion, history, and even reality itself. For centuries, whispers have echoed through the cathedral halls and underground corridors that the Ark of the Covenant didn't vanish. It was taken, protected, hidden by the church. But why would they keep it a secret? And if it is there, why hasn't the world seen it? Tonight, we pull back the velvet curtain to explore the theory that the Holy Ark has been resting in the Vatican's most sacred vaults. This is Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
We are your hosts, your conspiracy realists. My name is Shane Skwarek, here with the always delightful Mr. Phillips. And we welcome you back to the fourth installment. Is that the word you used before? Installment? That's the one you like?
It's such a good word.
Of our
We sound
Ark
so
series.
official.
We
Don't
do
we
sound
sound
really official. We do. I like new words entering our podcast. I tell you that all the time. I hate having to use the same words multiple times. I just feel like it's lazy, right? Like it's just, oh, you already used that word. But sometimes those are like the words I use all the time and they just come to my head. That's the problem. If we look the same, it's because we're dressed the same. We're recording this back to back as the last episode. Like we did the first two Ark ones. We gave you a little bit of break in between, do some time travel and stuff. But this is it. We're going to try to wrap this theory up. In our last episode, we addressed the Ark and its ties to the Knights Templar and how it might have moved from Jerusalem all the way to France to Scotland. And we thought maybe it could have gone to Oak Island or not. We speculated very briefly on that. But Mr. Phillips wasn't convinced. And as our resident Ark expert, not so much expert as enthusiast, I guess, he's here to tell us, Mr. Phillips, I think if the title didn't give it away, where is the Ark today?
If I had to place the Ark in one place today, it would be in the Vatican archives, my friend.
The Vatican archives. So last we left off, we were in the Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, which I think we theorized a little bit that it could have potentially just been built, the Rosslyn Chapel, solely to house the Ark, right? How does it get now to Italy?
So it's actually really simple. So we need to backtrack now, right? So we're in, when did we say Rosslyn Chapel was built? In the 1400s? So we have to go back.
1450. I think it was 1445.
Right. So we have to go back to that fateful day of Friday the 13th of 1307. And last episode we talked about how King Philip ordered the arrest and essentially slaughter of the Knights Templar. And we did talk about how some of those escaped, if you will, to Scotland, because at that point in time, Scotland was not under papal control. But, and this is a very big but, what you need to understand is that most of the Knights Templar, and when I say most, I'm talking like 98% of them, were arrested and slaughtered. They were all executed. So we're talking about a very, very small group of individuals that actually made it out to Scotland and various other places throughout the world. And so how does it end up in Italy, in Vatican City? Quite simply, they were wiped out. they're just, I mean, it was kind of, we talked earlier, they kind of felt the walls closing in. Is it possible that they had some kind of knowledge that this big rest was happening? Sure, they very well might have. But at the same point in time, a good 98% of them were arrested and were executed. And so, as the history books tell us, that's a true fact. That actually did happen. And so because of that, anything that the Templars did own and that they didn't have the opportunity to get out in time would have been confiscated by who? The Vatican. And so quite simply, that's the story. Hang on, we're not done. We're only 5 minutes in. There's a lot more to it.
That's
But
it,
in a
ladies
very
and gentlemen.
short
Like
form of
and
the story-
subscribe, and remember to ring that
Hey,
bell. Leave a comment.
We always say we
below.
want to keep them short. But that's the crux of the story of how the Ark ends up in the Vatican.
So I think the big question that a lot of people probably have is why the Vatican? And when you think about the context today, right? Like you look at the Vatican, you look at Vatican City as this very religious place. Not that it wasn't then, but very religious place, a place of peace, a place of quiet and calm, not something that you'd think would be like marching into another country and going to war, right? At this point in history, the Vatican's really this global religious authority, if you will. If you go through all of history here, and I'm trying to figure out how I can verbalize this without saying something wrong, but they've long been the guardian of a lot of like countless religious relics and historical documents. If anyone now has the means to move the Ark, now that the Templars are out of the picture, especially, it is the Vatican. I mean, we learned in our previous episode too, like the Templars are formed as a private army answering to the Pope. And so to think that after they sort of separate themselves and kind of go off and do their own thing, that, Christianity all of a sudden doesn't have its protectors anymore would probably be a bit naive. They still have power. They still have influence. They still have money. And they still have people willing to kind of fight the good fight, if you will. So why the Vatican? Again, we got another episode. We've already called him out, Todd Feehan, to do a Vatican Archives one. He told me he's researching it. We'll get him back here again. There's a lot that goes on there. There's a lot of speculation about a lot of different devices that are there. So this isn't going to be the first or the last time you hear the Vatican being involved here. You talked about this post-temple exodus, right? After the Second Temple's destruction, many relics are said to be scattered or seized around the world. A lot of theorists say that Roman soldiers, Mr. Phillips, who later aligned early on with the church, had confiscated a lot of these. So by 4th century, Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity, begins consolidating all this religious power. So does the Ark end up kind of being among these treasures that are quietly absorbed into the church's growing growing archives, or is it something that you think was intentionally sought out?
I think it's a very good possibility that they had knowledge. If the Templars had the Ark, I think that the Vatican had knowledge that they had the Ark, and so I think that I mean we just talked about how we don't want to use the same words. I'm going to use the same words again. It's the most important artifact known to mankind in the entire history of mankind. And so if they had any speculation that the Templars had possession of the Ark, you bet your ass that would have been number one on their list to go seize. Not just the countless other, treasures that they had. And listen, you said it pretty damn well yourself, right? Like, the Vatican and the Pope really weren't the Vatican and the Pope that we think of today. I mean, even though they kind of still are, they kind of do still have that power. It's just kind of not out in the limelight, if you will. But back in the day, they weren't hiding it, baby. It was kind of its own country. And so why not? They had the power to do it. So I don't have any reason to believe why they wouldn't.
So, I mean, you said in the last episode and sort of reinforced it here that you do believe that the Ark landed in Rosslyn Chapel. It's in Scotland at this point. How much time now goes between the Ark residing there and the church finding it and bringing it to Vatican City? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that, or you just?
I think it was probably very shortly after, right? Because we talked about the fact that the Templars were arrested and eventually slaughtered in 1307.
Right.
But in between the point where they were arrested and they were slaughtered, you better believe that they were tortured. Most of them were literally tortured to death. Sort of think a group. I mean, I think if I remember correctly, the Templars at some point in time, I think one of their higher numbers was estimated to be around 20,000. Don't quote me on that, but we're talking about a very large amount of people here. And so do the math, right? Statistically speaking, if you're going to torture 20,000 people, what percentage of those people are going to talk? Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that everybody within the Knights Templar knows everything about their inner workings. I'm sure they had some sort of a class system, if you will, that was set up, right? Not everybody had all the integral knowledge. But I find it hard to believe that if you're going to torture 20,000 individuals, that you're not going to get some really good information out of them. And because of that, if they did have the Ark and if they did bring it to Scotland, I don't think it was there for very long.
You know, it's interesting because the theory you proposed here that the Vatican traveled through France, Scotland, I'm sorry, that the Ark traveled through France, Scotland, and lands in the Vatican is not an accepted, not, I don't want to say an accepted theory. It's not a popular theory. It's not really a theory at all, right? The theory is actually that Jerusalem gets ransacked. And then in that period around 587 BCE, when it disappears, is where all these theories splinter off. The Ethiopia theory that we covered in the second episode of this, which would have been episode 148 of Cocktails and Conspiracies. Check it out. Look at that. Well, I only because I know that this is episode 151, so a little count backwards. The Knights Templar, which is actually going to be episode 150 because we had the time travel episode in between, and going directly to the Vatican. And that's when I was saying, you know, I got my notes scrambled up here a little bit before. So the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE, and they paraded these treasures through the streets of Rome, right? This ties into the rise of this like church state in the 4th century. So a lot of the theory on the Ark is not that it traveled through the Templar, but actually went right from Jerusalem to Vatican City and was then sort of the catalyst for this church state for you know, the church itself to kind of grow and earn power, which again can still tie into the theory that the Knights Templar are involved, and perhaps they run an alignment. Perhaps the Knights Templar were involved in picking the pieces up from Jerusalem, marching into Vatican City, because we talked about that when we looked at the map before, right? You got to go through Italy to get to France. You're not circumventing it. It'd be too difficult. It's plausible then to kind of following through with your theory now. And again, this is more speculation. This is not evidenced anywhere. So pardon us if we're, you know, making things up at this point, but it's plausible too that, you know, when we start to see tensions rise between the church and the Templars are sort of not going rogue necessarily, but they're befriending a lot of the enemies of the state, right? Or I guess the church state would be a better appropriate term there, that maybe they decide, hey, you know what, we're taking this shit with us, and they take what they want, and then they start that trek too. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Right, because you need to understand that and we talked about this many times, that the Templars were quite literally the armed faction of the Pope and of the Vatican at that point in time, right? And so who else would you trust to guard your most sacred artifact known? Who other than the Knights Templar?
Right.
So,
and then that timeline now adds up.
Exactly.
Right. So King Phillips. Oh no,
like
King
Phillips.
Yeah, I know. See,
I'm a fan.
so
King
used
Phillips.
to saying Phillips. 1307, King Phillips, you know, he's in deep debt to the Templar. You talked about this the last time. He pressures Pope Clement to dissolve the order, the Knights Templar. So there's evidence of tension right there. Then we talk about Friday the 13th, obviously. Then we talk the escape to Scotland. Then we talk the Rosslyn Chapel. Then my words are getting crazy. So if the Templars are weak, and I know I'm repeating a lot of what you said, but I'm like processing it myself now. If the Templars are weak, and there's word that now the Ark is in Scotland, who is already an enemy because of their disassociation with the church, does that now become a liability for the church, which incentivizes them to go there? Because this time you got to think now too, the Protestant church is gaining popularity as well. So today we don't think much of it. And in fact, most people just kind of talk about Catholicism as like interchangeable, right? Like, oh, you're Protestant, you're Christian, doesn't really make a difference. I guess it does, but at the time it certainly didn't. There's wars across Europe here. I think it's plausible. And I think it's even more plausible that, you know, when you talk about the remaining Templars that did exist, perhaps there's a degree of fear there. And Scotland was always only meant to be sort of like a holdover until they could figure something else out. Potentially they're the ones now that broker a deal, because we don't have any evidence, as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, of the Vatican walking into Scotland and mowing them down. Rosslyn Chapel still exists, right? Like, it's still there. It's still in all its infinite beauty. It's not like somebody came in there, banged the door down, and ripped this thing out of the ground, which is what would have had to have happened if it's buried deep in there and they didn't have a key to get in. And so I wonder now if maybe a deal gets brokered between the remaining Templars, handed off to the Vatican, which guarantees them safety, guarantees them, you know, they pledge their eternal silence. Nobody really knows where it is now, because nobody's known where it is since the fall of Jerusalem. You do have diplomatic exchanges that start to kind of roll into play, 17th, 18th centuries, where, you know, maybe tempers have died down a little bit. Maybe they kept it hidden that long. I don't know, but it's certainly the timeline across that period, I think, adds up enough where I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Dude, I tell you what, it's also not out of the realm of possibility that it was in Scotland and never made it to Rosslyn Chapel, right? So, you know,
You think it's just sitting in like a bunker somewhere in Scotland?
Well, it's possible that it was sitting in a bunker somewhere in Scotland. Then what you just alluded to, right? You have some very small sect of leftover Templar Knights who then broker a deal with the Vatican to give it to them. Now, if you are, let's play pretend for a second. Let's say that happened, okay? It's in Scotland. It's not yet in Rosslyn Chapel. Rosslyn Chapel is eventually going to be built to house, the Ark of the Covenant. You are a remainder of the Knights Templar. You're on the run. You broker this deal with the Vatican to guarantee your safety. You hand over the Ark. They have it. Are you going to then go announce that to the rest of your countrymen of Knights Templar, whoever's left, if you will? No, you're not. You're going to keep that shit silent, right? So, Rosslyn Chapel is still erected under the false pretenses that the Ark is underneath it, and it was never actually there. It was actually given to the Vatican the entire time. Again, this is all, we're 100% speculating. There's absolutely zero historical documentation that any of this occurred, but it's just something interesting to theorize, if you will.
Right, and there is no evidence across the board, right? After its disappearance, or alleged disappearance.
Right, there's no evidence of any of this.
It's all speculation.
Sure.
Rosslyn itself is a mystery that baffles archaeologists. Nobody can explain it. The Vatican, of course, never confirms nor denies any possession of not just the Ark, but any artifacts. And we know that the idea of there's a broader pattern of Catholic relic consolidation throughout history. And again, I guess we could touch on it here because we're with the Vatican anyway, but you're going to hear, we talked about the Holy Grail through the last couple episodes, but that's not the only thing. There is something, a time travel device called, and I've used this before, I've got to say it slowly, the Chrono Visor, because that word sometimes gets mixed up with, that Corona beer that you drink and something else. And it flags people. I learned that from AJ at the Y-Files. But that was a time travel device, right? We've talked about in one of our episodes there that allegedly it was given to the Vatican and it's sitting in the archives right down there. So throughout history and this is a device that was created, right? There was a tangible device. Whether or not it worked is pure speculation, but the device isn't speculation. The device was created. It was there. It existed. Throughout history, they've always been tied to hiding things there. They don't agree, disagree, they don't confirm, they don't deny, they don't say anything about anything. It's very much kept silent, and nobody has any idea what's down there at all.
That adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it, right?
That certainly adds fuel to the fire, the mystery.
When you are a very powerful state entity, whatever you want to call it, and you have this vault, and you won't let anybody see what's inside of it, well, that's just going to fan the flames of...
And you start to wonder why.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is interesting is Scotland does have deep ties to Freemasonry, which of course as we discussed a little bit last episode, has its roots in Templar lore and kind of the breakaway there. So I now tend to wonder, we said before, maybe it was just the beginning of this episode now the episodes are blending together, Mr. Phillips, that it's not insane to think that the Freemasons would just separate from the Templar, because the Templar has long been aligning itself with defects from the Catholic Church, right? Like that's literally what their MO has been, is just aligning themselves with all these breakaway groups. And so for people within the group that's aligning with breakaway groups and understanding them to then break away makes sense. But you got to think catalyst. What would create that catalyst for this secret society to kind of branch off and then one of them to die? Like the Freemasons are not a secret society. They're very much out in the public. Now their dealings and right. Like I mean, they became public in the 1600s, right? Like it is out there. Their dealings and really what it's all about is there's probably a lot of myth and legend with that. How much of it is actually true, I guess, remains to be seen. But what would be the catalyst for that? And that's where you got me thinking now with this theory of yours. If the Ark travels from Jerusalem to Italy, to the Vatican, directly, and it's just been sitting there this whole time, the Knights of the Templar story changes dramatically. And what happens after that, I don't know. Why it rises and falls, don't know. Why it rises with that power and that money, don't know. There's probably other things we can attribute to that. If, however, you adopt the Phillips theory and it hits France, they get it knocked out of France by Philip, it hits Scotland, and the Templars are now decimated, and there's a small group of them left. The Templars, you can, for all intents and purposes, they're going to die, but you wonder, are we going to try to rebuild this thing? Or are we trying to get it going? Why the Templars then do die and the Freemasons appear? And if we think about brokering that deal with the Vatican, my inclination would be that some people are on board because they want to just kind of guarantee their safety. Maybe they had ties to the church, and maybe they still believe, right? I believe in Joe Hendry. They believe in the Catholic Church, the Vatican City. There we go. A little shout out for you, Big Joe. Retweet this. Those people broker the deal to bring the Ark back to the Vatican, but that causes a rift within the core group of the Templars that are left. Templars disintegrate because the people that broker the deal fold back into the Catholic Church. It's part of the deal. Templars dissolve. The rest of them don't want to be associated to the Templars because they committed the ultimate betrayal. They spin off. They become the Freemasons. And that becomes that catalyst you're looking for as to why the Freemasons appeared, mimicking a lot of the same patterns and the same rituals and the same symbolisms of the Templar, but being its own entity. Templars are dead. And it's not like they were a private society previously. They were known. So for them to go from known to completely gone seems odd, especially when you see something birth out of the ashes. And I use that phrase intentionally because something doesn't just birth out of the ashes without a reason. So piecing these things together here, man, that's where my mind is going right now.
No, you're right. And then what I also look to, and this isn't a Freemasons episode, but the Freemasons, they were a powerful sect of people, right? And so, yes, they were, they were publicly known in the 1600s. They were, that's when it gained popularity and they were okay as a public group, if you will. But we're talking about a time between really from 1307 to the 1600s. So we're talking about almost 300 years in which the Freemasons, had an opportunity to come to, I don't know if you would call it power. They never really, and again, they were a shadowy, secret-y kind of society at that point in time. And so, they never amassed the wealth and the power that the Knights Templar did, but it is widely speculated that they, to this very day, still hold a lot of power, right? The Freemasons. And influence, right? And power and influence, well, one and the same, if you will. Can't have one without the other, right? And so, where does that come from? And so, what's interesting, and you could really kind of spitball this any way you want to, is that what was left over in terms of their riches from the Knights Templar that the Freemasons eventually, wound up procuring, if you will.
So see, this is where I'm thinking, you said it could still be in Scotland. Maybe it's always been in Rosslyn Chapel. Maybe they knew it was there, left it there. This is where I would think no. For everything you just said, is the Freemasons never really grew to power. And if they had the Ark in their possession and they maintained the Ark in their possession, I think you would have seen at that point, because of the wars going on, you would have seen the Catholic Church in their infancy as the Freemasons stomp them out. They would have been done. And if they did have it in their possession, they would have risen to that same level. And they've never really done that. Now, I think I agree with you that, yes, they've always had a lot of influence. It seems there's always been powerful political figures that are tied to them. And we can certainly dive into that in a Freemason-specific episode. But I think this is still relevant to the conversation, is that sort of reinforces to me what you just said, your theory that it's sitting in the Vatican archives. Because if you do go back to the brokering deal and you do see those remaining Templars, they broker the deal over to the Vatican, that is why the Freemasons take now a period of time to grow. Obviously, you have to go through generations, get people involved, get committals. You see it in cults all the time, right? Like the best thing, they try to crank out kids as fast as they can, because the best thing for a cult is somebody that's born into it that doesn't know anything different. And so after, doing generations of people that are committed to the cause, they're less likely to splinter because they don't know anything else. I think following the same rituals and practices and tactics allows you to garner influence and favor. And I don't think that they ever necessarily had like a bitter rivalry. I'm trying to think of a good example, but when like people are like friends, but like they're not really friends. They actually like hate each other, but like they're friends because it's like convenience.
I think ladies would call it frenemies.
Frenemies, perfect. Like they're frenemies because it's a mutually beneficial relationship, even though they can't stand each other, right? And I tend to wonder if that might have been the relationship now of what happens with the Catholic Church and the Freemasons is like, all right, like you were part of us, you weren't part of us. Part of you split and came back to us, and the other part just wants to keep doing their own thing. We know we can help each other out, and we don't hate you that much because you're kind of on the other side of the fence, and we have difference of opinions, but we still have we're still sharing a lot of the same secrets, right? And so it's mutually beneficial for us to sort of stay out of each other's way, but maybe keep each other's secrets because we can probably both take each other down. Again, though, the world has changed, and so the Catholic Church doesn't necessarily hold that degree of power anymore in that way. But some would argue that it does hold a tremendous amount of power and influence, more than any other group or religion in the world. And again, that's a whole different debate.
That's a sketchy debate for this platform.
Right, for sure. But I don't know, man. I'm trying to make sense of this as we kind of go along. And to me, it seems to start to add up. And you can probably see the smoke coming out of my ears. There's a new camera here, so hopefully you can. I keep making sure that I'm focused in it, so it's not blurry. Yeah, I think that trajectory around makes a lot of sense, and I want to bring up the map again. I'm going to bring up, what do I say, Temple Mount first. Let's bring up that map, because I think that globe map, I don't know why Google Map defaulted me to the globe map, but it worked for what we needed it for. I don't know why the frick it's not zooming me in. Okay, let me share this bad boy again. Well, I didn't like it, but I liked it because it really worked for what I was trying to do. All right, so I've got to hide your little head here. Let's get that out of the way.
That's okay.
I got to make this a little bit bigger. I disappeared. All right, so we've got Israel again here, right? This is Temple Mount right here in Israel. Okay. When Israel falls, right? The theories, just to kind of circle back, are that it goes south and it ends up down here in Ethiopia. That it bypasses Italy, and the Knights Templar take it all the way to France, and then they take it up to Scotland, which I'm not even seeing here.
It's going to be way more north.
Oh, is it that far north?
That's going to be on. It's look at Great Britain,
should
and
be
it
like
should
right around
be
here.
the very top.
Yeah. Oh, right there it is. Yeah, it just wasn't popping up until I zoomed all the way in. So you're saying that it's coming from Israel all the way around, just bypassing Italy. It's going to France, then it's going all the way up here, Scotland, and maybe, just maybe, it makes its way all the way over here to Newfoundland, generally this area for Oak Island, and then makes its way all the way back over here. Or the Phillips theory here, as we're going to dub it, I don't want to help prove Google Maps, is going from Israel to Vatican, right here, to France, because the Templars are taken out of there, up to Scotland, all the way up here. I don't know why you have to zoom in so much. The Scottish people must be really pissed off about that. And at that point, makes its way all the way back down to Italy. It's a fair thought.
A lot of travel.
It's a lot of
It's a lot of travel for a little
It's
box.
certainly a lot of travel, but if you think that they're on the move, you're trying to stay as far away from people as you can. I don't know, man. I like that theory. I like that theory a lot.
Yeah. Also, you're talking about at that point in time, right before the Templars fell. You're talking about a very powerful group of people with the means to move whatever they want, wherever they want to move it. And so, while we look at the map and you might go, "Wow, that just seems wildly," I don't know. It seems absurd, right? And it very well may be. But if you're trying to protect something that is so sacred and important to you and powerful to you, that I mean, it is kind of the being of your whole existence, right? Like, the idea that they have the Ark is, well, that's why they became so powerful, and without the Ark, they don't have the power anymore. And I'm not talking about, like, mythological power. I'm talking about, like, hey, like, we've got the Ark. And so if you have that and it's that important, you're going to go to extreme lengths to hide it. So not without, it's not so absurd when you think about it in that regard.
There is I don't know what you'd call it, a rule, I guess, that every year a handful of researchers are granted access under strict guidelines. There's no browsing, no peekings. You request and they deliver only what you're approved to see. I wonder, what is that how does that process work? What does that catalog look like? I mean, I'm sure somebody's walked up and said, "Hey, yo, can I see the Ark of the Covenant?" Like, obviously they're not going to approve that, but I wonder what that process looks like. And I wonder where you get to see it. Like, you just, sit at a table in a chaired off room, or do you like walk through the archives? Like, I'm curious what that looks like.
Dude, I mean, could you imagine what's in there? I mean, you could literally prepare, that could be anything. Nobody's ever, it's never been made public. We have no idea what it looks like. But I mean, the untold treasures that could potentially be inside, the Vatican it's a crazy thought.
It's wild, man. It's wild, man. And it's not like there's no hints about it either, right? Like, there's several chapels and rooms in the Vatican that are displaying artworks featuring golden chests and winged angels, beams of light or divine light. They're all motifs that are matching the biblical description of the Ark, which is really all we have to go off here. So is it coincidence? Maybe. Sure. Is it because it's in the Bible, right? Sure, of course. But again, like, I think there's like almost like a law of interpretation. When you read something in print, and this is like the whole argument with like movies. I'm sorry, yeah, movies that come from books, is you read something and you come up with your interpretation, and then why those people are the most annoying people on earth. Like, oh, it's not as good as the book. Yeah, because like their interpretation, the picture they painted in their own imagination is different. The thing with the Ark, and this is what we covered in our very first episode too, 147, is that all of the interpretations, or at least most of them, the large majority, the Ark always looks the same, or generally the same. Of course, there could have been one drawing or interpretation of it that has just been repeated across the board, but it travels across a lot of different cultures. There's multiple religions really based off of this thing. And the visual is the same, which leads me to believe that in some way, this is I can't even say the word anymore. In some way, this existed. It's not an interpretation out of a Bible. It's not an interpretation out of text. Of course, you could say a box with winged angels, but they always look very similar. They're always perched the same. I didn't read the scripture, the passage, so I don't know if maybe they describe it down to the T and have measurements in there. I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe I'm lost, but
They do have measurements.
I don't know. Are you serious?
It was 52 by 31 by 31.
Oh no. I mean, by the angels and the
Oh,
positioning.
right.
No.
No. Just measurements of the box. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, man. I mean, I think it's plausible to believe that it exists or existed at some point in time. And I mean, if you just look at like what we know that the Catholic Church has, the menorah from the Second Temple, like the Romans looted it, and it's still being held in the Vatican's possession, or at least I guess believed to be held in the Vatican's possession. There's been nothing that said it's not. And so if we know that they have that, and we are to believe that the Ark existed in Jerusalem at the same time, well, what's not to say that everything they got there wasn't taken and held in their possession, right? Like, I know causation, not causation, not correlation. Is that the right? Yeah, causation is not correlation, but yeah. I don't know, Mr. Phillips. Maybe a little rambling by me.
Look, it's an interesting one, and I joked when we first started this episode about the story kind of being short and simple, but kind of using Occam's razor. The simplest answer is it's in the Vatican. If the Templars are in possession of the Ark, because they essentially wiped out almost all of the Templars, and in doing so, they would have come into possession of any of the riches that the Templars had at that point in time. And so, if that occurred, very simply, it was in the Vatican and it's still there today.
I didn't want it to be in the Vatican because it's such an easy answer.
I know.
And so when we started this a couple episodes ago, it's like, oh, it's in the Vatican. That's where we're gonna end it. So we pushed it to the end. And I was trying to find holes the whole way through. I was in on the Ethiopia story. I thought that was an interesting one.
It's interesting.
But then when you look at everything, it just doesn't add up, right? Like we talked about that in Ethiopia
feels
episode.
off. Doesn't it feel off?
It feels out of place, yes. Beyond out of place, like again, careful how I phrase things sometimes because I don't know how offended people are when they listen to these things. But like Ethiopia there's never been when we talk about this in the episode, there's never been a point in history where they were like a powerhouse or a juggernaut. And to possess something this coveted and this allegedly powerful during a period where the world was at war, I find it hard to believe that you're going to have one jerk off standing there with a spear holding people off, right? Like, it ain't going to happen, man. Like, if the church knew it was there, speculated it was there, of any power at that time, any empire at that time, had any thought, and it did happen, there was war in Ethiopia and they fought to the death in front of there, I think they would have found it and they would have mowed that place to the ground. The ideas of the Templar, they just make sense. And I think the cataclysmic rise can be explained by a lot of things, right? And maybe in a Templar episode, we'll talk about some of the other riches that they may have found or not found. But I think that certainly adds up. But when we look back at the map, I just can't help but think that was the trajectory. Like the Romans came in, they ransacked Jerusalem, they took everything they had there, they build this again, bad word to use, but this secret army, more or less, the secret service, if you will. I had to stop myself on like certain things I was saying. That group decides they're going to kind of go a little rogue. They take this thing with them because, like, you know what? Like, fuck it. Like, this is going to rise us to power. They grow. They bounce around. They fall apart because they get mowed down by the Catholic Church, effectively. Yeah, and then they surrender. And they surrender it, and the remaining people that didn't want to surrender get pissed, and they spin off into the Freemasons. It's so clean and dry, Mr. Phillips.
Oh, it's
Phillips
so
theory.
There's no webs there.
There's no webs.
It's one linear path.
One linear path. It all makes sense. It adds up, and it aligns historically, which is what I really like. One of the few times I think we're going to dub our own theory here, the Phillips theory.
Well, look, the only other time I've had a theory was I think the Challenger. And so listen, I'm happy to come up with theories.
There we go, baby.
You know, I enjoy it. It's fun.
Would you believe, ladies and gentlemen, I asked him if he prepared for this episode, and he said no because he was out of the house for like 8 hours before this.
Like 8 hours, yeah.
I sit here, I've got all these notes and stuff. I had to skip around. I ditched half my notes because this guy came out of here rattling off things that I didn't even prepared for. That's been 4 episodes, ladies and gentlemen, on the Ark, right? Like, I don't know where else we take this, Mr. Phillips. We can't talk the Ark anymore.
Let us know. Look, look. There are other Ark stories. There's Cyprus is one of them. We could potentially do something on Oak Island. We could do an entire episode on that. But I think in terms of the most likely scenarios that occurred and places and people that would have had the Ark and potentially still have it today, I think we covered all of the major topics.
And honestly, if not for Graham Hancock, we probably would have never talked about Ethiopia, but he gave a lot of validity and credibility to that theory. And that would be that would be one I'd love to talk to him about. Us getting him on here would be a really tough sell, I'm sure. But if anybody else out there is watching and they have a lot more pull than us to get a guess like Graham Hancock, I'm curious what his mindset would be at this point on the Ark of the Covenant.
Graham, if you're watching,
with that, guys,
let us know, baby.
We're right here, baby. Conspiracyrealist.com. You can fill out the little form on there, send us an email. We'll reach back out. I promise I'm quick an email back, which is a great time to remind each and every one of you to click that like button. If you like this episode, click the like button. If you didn't like the episode, because that hurts us just as much as it helps us, as long as you click the like one. Click the subscribe button if you're following us on Apple Podcasts. Rate us. Give us 5 stars right there. We'll start reading your 5-star reviews on here. If you leave a nice thing to say about us, if you leave a crappy one, well, we'll just make fun of you, honestly. We'll make fun of you if you like it, too. If you want to just be made fun of, leave 5 stars. And
we'll do whatever you want.
Whatever you want for the 5 stars. We're really easy, right? We're on Amazon Music now, or Amazon Podcast, whatever they call their platform. We're on that one now, too. We're on a whole bunch of others. Podbean, I don't know. Wherever you find podcasts, we are officially on them all. But our main platforms, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, as always. ConspiracyRealist.com for all our social networks. And tell us in the comments where you think the Ark is. Do you think it really is in Ethiopia? Do you think it's in the Vatican? Is it still in Scotland? Is it in Oak Island? And do you live close enough to go start digging? Or are we completely off and you have absolutely no idea where it really is, and it's a whole big made-up myth? Tell us that too. Mr. Phillips, send us home.
Raise your glass for mystery, baby. Signing off.
Ooh, he's really giving us our tagline there. Cocktails and conspiracies. Everyone, so long.